Welcome to Proline TV here on Tuesday, March 18th. Kevin Rogers with you as we take a look at tonight's NHL board and first period best bets as well as trends to look for in every game. And without further ado, let's get right to the sheet. And that's what we're going to do now. And if you're new to this, I have a first period sheet I keep on Google, which is updated every day. Every team and what they've done in the first period, as well as their overall records as far as straight up totals and both teams to score in the first period. So let us begin with the first matchup of the night, and it's the Red Wings and the Capitals as they meet up in D.C. and Washington coming back from a road trip out in California, which they wrapped up beating the Sharks in the finale. And looking at what Washington has done of late, they had a couple high-scoring games against Anaheim and San Jose. They lost at Los Angeles, which really isn't crazy. The Kings have been really good at home this year in the first period, but also you see how well Washington has played of late. And they've won 6 of their past 7 games. And also since the Four Nations break, they have gone on a 9-3 run to the over in the first period. So that has been pretty profitable. Capitals have been a really good first period over team all season long. And the last time they actually played Detroit was back on March 7th at home, and they trailed 2-1 after the first period, came back with 4 unanswered goals to win 5-2. So we'll see if these teams play another high-scoring first period. As far as the Red Wings go, Detroit, the last few games have been pretty good in the first period. 4-0-2 in the past 6 games, and they haven't allowed a goal in the first period in 3 of the past 4. So we've seen some unders come in for the Red Wings, even though they haven't won a lot of games during this stretch. But also Peter Mrazek, who was once a Red Wing, was in Chicago. Now he's back with the Red Wings again. We'll see if he ends up getting the nod again for a 4th straight game. And he played very well against Vegas back on Sunday in a shutout. So the Red Wings have been a little better in the first period over the past few games. Now going to the next game, the Islanders and the Penguins in Pittsburgh. And we'll start with the Penguins just because they haven't had a lot of success, it feels like, this season. And yet the Penguins have been pretty good. Overall, they won 4 in a row, and they are 3-0-1 in the first period the past 4 games. In fact, they've trailed after the first period just once in the last 7 games. And also, looking at this column, if the Penguins score, the last time they lost a first period when scoring at least a goal, look how far back that goes. December 19th against Nashville, a game they came back and won, was the last time they scored at least 1 goal in the first and didn't lead. So basically, all the times that they are obviously losing the first period is when they're not scoring a goal. But when they get at least a goal, they've had success. So if you think the Penguins can get at least 1 on the Islanders tonight, then maybe it's a good shot with them. And Pittsburgh also was on a 5-0 under run in the first period before they scored 2 against New Jersey on Saturday, won that game 7-3. So the Penguins playing a little bit better. Now looking at the Islanders, they did come back to beat the Panthers back on Sunday, 4-2. They were down 2-0 in that game. They scored 4 in the third. That snapped the 3-game losing streak. But also the Islanders now have gone 4 straight games without scoring a goal in the first period, resulting in 4 straight unders. And probably Ilya Sorokin will play again because he plays basically every game for the Islanders in net. So the Islanders looking to get a little revenge on the Penguins. They lost to them last time they played back on December 29th. They played a back-to-back after Christmas. The first game, the Islanders won at home 6-3. Second game, they lost 3-2. And first game went over in the first. Second game went under in the first. So obviously, we'll see which way it goes tonight. But the Islanders, though, 4 straight games without a goal in the first period. The Flames and the Rangers hook up at the Garden tonight. Calgary back in action after they lost to Toronto last night. It was a 1-1 game at the end of 20 minutes, and then Toronto exploded in the second period, ended up winning 6-2. Dustin Wolf got pulled in that game for the Flames. Dan Vladar played. Guessing Vladar will probably play in the back-to-back here tonight. That was probably the plan all along. But Calgary, though, they've trailed just once after the first period in the last 7 games. They've struggled to win a lot of these games, but also when you look at some of the teams they played, it's been a gauntlet for the Flames since the Four Nations break. They did start with San Jose, but they went on that road trip out east to get Washington, Tampa Bay, Florida, Carolina, and they did beat Washington, but then struggled the next 3 games, won at Philadelphia, hung around with Dallas, and then they beat Montreal at home. Vancouver, still middle of the road team, but Colorado, Toronto, it's been a rough road for the Flames of late. And now they draw the Rangers, who, when you look at what New York has done, obviously this season, they've had their issues, but they're still in the playoff race. They are right there for the second wild card in the Eastern Conference, coming off a loss Sunday night at home to Edmonton. But that went through a long streak of not trailing after the first period. So it was a pretty impressive job by the Rangers to at least be there after the first period. And they gave up a goal against Edmonton late in the first on Sunday night, lost that game 3-1. And now we'll see what they do against Calgary tonight. The Rangers did lose in Calgary on November 21st, 1-0. Or excuse me, they were down 1-0 after 1, lost the game 3-2. But low-scoring first period. And we'll see how it goes again tonight for this one when they meet at Madison Square Garden. The Ducks and the Stars in Dallas, and the Stars are almost a 350 favorite in this game. And we'll begin with Anaheim. And Anaheim actually went down to Dallas and beat them on November 18th. They led 2-0 after 1, won that game 4-2. And then in the next matchup, they beat Dallas at home 2-1 right before the Four Nations break. So Dallas 0-2 against Anaheim this year, which is kind of interesting. And you look at the Ducks and what they've done of late, that they just got blitzed by the Blues. They've struggled against St. Louis this year, losing to them 3 times. But Anaheim, though, they are 0-2 the last 4 games in the first period, and obviously they're big underdogs in a lot of them, especially tonight. And the over/under in the first has gone up and down in the last 10 games or so. When you look at the Dallas Stars, they are coming off that overtime loss to Colorado on Sunday. That's now 0-3-2 in the first period of the last 5 for the Stars. So they've had some issues there. They've lost 3 or 4 overall. And we'll see if Casey DeSmith starts for Jake Ottinger tonight. That you would think that DeSmith would get the start here and they'd give Ottinger a rest. But the last few games, the Stars, like they're playing Colorado, Winnipeg. These are teams right with them in the Central Division. And now you get Anaheim. It seems like more of a layup tonight, but they've lost them twice. So the Ducks have done something to get over on the Stars twice. So we'll see if Dallas gets some revenge later on. The Kraken and the Blackhawks up in Chicago tonight. And let's begin with Seattle here. The Kraken, earlier this season, they were scoreless with the Blackhawks at home back on November 14th, won that game 3-1. So you had a scoreless first period there. The next time they played, December 19th, at the United Center, scoreless first period, Chicago won 3-1. So twice we have seen scoreless first periods between the Blackhawks and the Kraken. And Seattle has played a little better in the first period of the last few games, going 3-0-1. So that's a positive for them, even though they lost to Winnipeg on Sunday. But good starts in the first period, 4 straight games with a goal in the first for the Kraken. For the Blackhawks, who are a last place team in the Central, they've had their problems. And look at that. The Four Nations break. Since then, they have led twice after the first period, and that's it. The last 5 games, they have not scored a goal in the first period. And they brought in Spencer Knight from the Panthers, and he played well that first game against the Kings, then beat Utah, but the last 2 lost to Colorado and San Jose. So we'll see if Knight starts again tonight for the Blackhawks, but Chicago just has not gotten off to good starts in the first period. And also, they've not scored a first period goal against Seattle so far this year. So, again, 2 scoreless first periods between the Kraken and the Blackhawks so far this season. Edmonton hosts Utah tonight. And the hockey club, they actually led 2-0 at home against Edmonton back on November 29th, lost that game 4-3 in overtime. They were tied at 1 on December 31st, lost 4-1 on the road. So the Oilers so far 2-0 against the Kraken. And now, or the Kraken, the Hockey Club, the colors are very similar. Utah, the last 3 games, 1-1-1. You see the over-under has alternated every game, basically. So you would think it's due for an over tonight with the Oilers after Utah just won at Vancouver back a few nights ago. Edmonton was a huge over team most of the season. And this streak, now, let's look at these 2 streaks here out of the gate from the Four Nations break. They had that crazy game against Colorado before the Four Nations break, went over. And then they went 7-1 to the over in the first period, Edmonton. Now 4 straight unders in the first period, including the last 3. They haven't allowed a goal. So they've been pretty good in the first period of late as far as from a defensive standpoint, that they got burned for 4 against Anaheim back on March 4th. And in the last 6 games, they've allowed just 3 goals in the first period. So Edmonton has done a better job in the opening period. Now they're back from this East Coast trip, so we'll see how they respond. Now, they had that East Coast trip to start after the Four Nations break, and Anaheim dropped the 4 on them in the first period. So after the long road trip, now we'll see how Edmonton responds to it. When you look back at some of the other times they've come back from a long road trip, 3 in the West against Minnesota, Colorado, and Vancouver. They were tied at 1 with Washington back on January 21st. Against LA, they were scoreless after 1. Let's see what kind of longer road trips. Columbus, it was 1-1. So really, the Oilers, even that one, those 4 in late October, early November, then they lost to New Jersey 3-0. They gave up a goal in the first. They have not been really that good, Edmonton, coming back from the long road trip. And I know a lot of teams are like that too, but the Oilers have not really fared well. So maybe you want to take a shot with Utah in the first period tonight. You can get them right now at DraftKings at plus 140. That's not bad. Plus 130 at FanDuel. So it's not really that terrible as far as getting a nice little return if you think Utah can maybe lead 1-0 after the first period. The Jets and the Canucks, they meet in Vancouver tonight, and we'll start with Winnipeg. First with them, they did drop 3 on Vancouver back on January 14th at home, won that game 6-1 going away. So I'm sure the Canucks didn't forget about that game. Winnipeg has won 3 straight. They've won 5 of 6. They're playing a little bit better. Last 3 have gone over in the first period, and they had a struggle against Seattle in the first period, but then settled down the final 40-plus minutes in that game, won in overtime. So Winnipeg, at least, getting a little bit on track from that standpoint. Now, Vancouver, they, in the first period, they've been good since the break. They had a tough game against Montreal. They were down 2-0 and lost 4-2, but they've only trailed twice after the first period since the Four Nations break. They had a 3-game over streak in the first period, but then went under against Utah back on Sunday night. Now they continue their homestand. This is with the exception of one quick trip to Calgary. They've been at home for a while, but I'm sure Vancouver looking for a little bit of revenge for that blowout loss to Winnipeg back earlier this season. Now we're going to look at tonight's best bets, as we have 2 of them here tonight, and we have a side and a total. We're going to begin with the side, we'll go with the side first since I said it. All right. Predators, we're going to take them against the Blues in the first period. And let's go back to the screen here. Nashville went through a very long stretch this year of dominating in the first period. They didn't trail after the first period at home. Let me just put that out there, at home. Because at the beginning of the season, they had a lot of reds, a lot of whites. Whites were the ties, reds are the losses, greens are the wins. And there was a long time that they did not lead any time after the first period. And then at the beginning of November, they went through a nice stretch, even at home. The yellow was at home, that they didn't trail after the first period at home. They went through a long time. That's from November until like late January, that it was almost automatic that they would lead after the first period at home. And then they went through the final few games before the Four Nations tournament. They didn't lead in 7 straight games total. And then after the Four Nations, 3 more after the break. They didn't score a goal in the first period. They led Winnipeg 2-1 and won that game 2-1 at home. They beat Boston on the road. But the only thing I'll say about this is with the Predators. Last 5 games, they have not trailed. Granted, they haven't led, but they haven't trailed after the first period. That's not, 6 straight games. They had 5 ties in the Boston game they led. But also, 4 games in a row, they haven't allowed a goal in the first period. So Nashville's tightened up a bit in the first period. Now, I'm going to go back to this game on Friday, December 27th. Nashville, after the Christmas break, they were at St. Louis. They allowed 4 goals in the first period, lost 7-4. So I'm sure the Predators want to make a bit of a statement to the Blues after they had that horrendous first period in a tough spot after the Four Nations break. Or I'm sorry, after the Christmas break, excuse me. Now, looking at St. Louis and what they've done. St. Louis is off a couple big wins at Minnesota Saturday, against Anaheim at home on a back-to-back. So now you're off of the back-to-back set, and you have to go to Nashville tonight. Yeah. Even looking at what St. Louis did on their most recent road trip prior to the Minnesota game, they didn't lead after the first period in any of those games before the Wild game. And in 5 of those games, they allowed a first period goal. So I believe Nashville is a good shot for them to get back on track somewhat. All I need for them is 20 minutes. Lead 1-0 after 20. I don't care if you get blown out. Just get through the first 20 minutes. So Nashville, we're going to go with them as our side tonight in the first period. Now we're going to go to the total. And it's going to be the first game of the night. We waited till the end to do this. Ottawa and Montreal. All right. First of all, with Ottawa, they have lost twice to Montreal this year. They swept Toronto, but they can't beat Montreal. So the first game from the break, Ottawa trailed Montreal 3-2 at home, lost 5-2. I think this is one where now we're going to have a little tighter in the first period. Ottawa's won 6 straight, so they're feeling good about themselves. They did not allow a goal in the first period against Toronto back on Saturday in that win. They haven't allowed a first period goal in 3 of the past 4 games. They had 4 first period goals against Boston back last Thursday, but for the most part, at least defensively, they have played very well. And I'm guessing Linus Ullmark will start again because they've been riding him all the way through, and they're red hot right now. Now, for the Canadians, they've been really good in the first period of late. And they had, I mean, what's so interesting about Montreal is they've had, 6 games they've scored at least 2 goals in the first period. So really, really impressive by them. They led Florida 2-0 Saturday. And it was a bit of a letdown probably for the Panthers after beating the Maple Leafs on Thursday. And even with that being said, and Montreal's had success with Ottawa, I think this will be a tighter first period tonight. And after having that 5-goal outburst in the last time, I think we're going to go backwards here. And let's go with the under in the first period between the Senators and the Canadians as our second best bet for tonight. Again, we appreciate you tuning in to Proline TV for today's edition of our first period best bets and trends and all the stats you need to bet first periods in the NHL. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, Proline TV, here on YouTube. I am Kevin Rogers. You can find me on the X at Rogers Picks. And as always, best of luck with your bets.